Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We have lots to discuss as usual. Mary, my wife, is joining us tonight. We've got some things to talk about. And we've also got another special guest joining us, Bry, who you might remember from, I think he's been on twice now. Last time was a few weeks ago. We're going to have a debate. Bry has some different views than us, let's put it that way. So we're always interested in discussing. And I think a debate's quite entertaining and interesting. So we're going to discuss a couple of topics later on. But first of all, there's been so much going on in the news. Obviously, we need to have a little summary of that first. But some events first, some announcements. Right, what's coming up? On Saturday, Unite for Education are having an information evening in Edinburgh. You can see details of that on our X feed. And this is for Christians in particular interested in Christian schools or home education, looking at the options, different organizations that can help with those things. So that is on Saturday, Unite for Education, information afternoon. A quick report on some things from last week. Saturday, there was the SPUC pro-life chain in Edinburgh. That was fantastic, was it not?
It was amazing, yeah, really encouraging.
Going on 200 people, far more. I didn't go last year, I was there the year before, but far more people than I'd seen there before. So that was really good. And there was a counter-protest on the other side of the road. How would you describe them?
Well, they were small in number.
And
interested in colour.
Yeah. I said if I came up with an evil plan to stage a fake counter-protest in order to sort of embarrass the pro-abortion movement, I'd have come up with something like they had there, like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. One of the things that Mary noticed, actually, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence there, who are men as dress up as women, as nuns, whatever. And then there's someone else holding a sign saying, no ovaries, no opinion, next to men dressed up as women dressed up as nuns or something. I mean, anyway, so that was that. That was really good. I went to an event last Thursday to speak at it as part of a panel at one of the Opus Dei centres in Glasgow, communities. I really enjoyed that. It was a fascinating evening. So it's good to be invited there. We had our protest on Saturday in Glasgow about the hate speech legislation. Unfortunately, Glasgow Cabby wasn't able to be with us, so I hope he's back on good form. Hope he's better soon. So best wishes to him. But that was a good event as well. We'll get some things on video from that before too long. Niall Fraser couldn't join us either. He was going to be our host for the afternoon, but he's expecting a baby any day now, I think. So he felt it was too risky to come over to Glasgow. So that's a few things that have been going on. But you might have heard something in the news about Humza Yousaf that has resigned. Now, I'll just talk about this briefly before I get on to the things I want to talk about with Mary more. I mean, Humza Yousaf resigned. So, I mean, is that something? And is that really great news? Well, not really. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon was like standard SNP plus sort of a female supremacist and like LGBT fanatic. And then we had Humza Yousaf, who was more, I think he's a bit of a female supremacist as well, but he was more like the Muslim and the race issues. That was his identity politics bandwagon. So now Humza Yousaf's gone. Who will we have next? I mean, there's talk of John Swinney. I'll maybe talk about that later. I mean, John Swinney, I think, is a remarkable, well, maybe character is not the right word, but his track record is pretty appalling. He pushed through the LGBT inclusive education program in Scotland, introduced the vulgar and disgusting RSHP.Scot sex education resources, stuck to his guns despite all opposition, and now he is looking to become First Minister again. And then Kate Forbes looks like being another contender as well. What would I say about Kate Forbes? Would she be any better? I would say no. She won't be any, because she's already said, for example, she is committed to continuing the killing of the unborn in Scotland. So even if in her heart of hearts she might be pro-life, so what? I just don't care in the slightest what she might think in her like secret inner thoughts. I care about what she do as First Minister, and she's made it absolutely clear that she is, abortion will continue. The unborn will be killed with her as First Minister. And now you might say, you have to make compromises to get to the top. You have to be wise. Well, I don't think sacrificing the unborn for the sake of your ambitions is acceptable. So I would urge Kate to think again And maybe that this process will be the thing that makes her realize she's in the wrong place in the wrong party. And that you can come and join us, and which you would be very welcome to join the Scottish Family Party, where she could speak freely about her views and be very welcome. So we'll await a call maybe in the next couple of months. Now, what we're going to talk about today in particular is it was a buffer zone debate in the Scottish Parliament. And Mary, you went, no less. I watched it on Parliament TV. So what did you make of it?
Just seemed like lots of people saying the same thing. I heard lots of words repeated, like human rights, healthcare, women's rights. Just everyone that I heard. I was only there for maybe an hour and a half or something. But it was just the same lines that everyone was saying, and words that were missing were baby was one. Baby's rights certainly didn't come into it. That wasn't on anybody's script. Yeah.
I watched quite a lot of it live as well. It is remarkable. Even 2 hours into the debate, you'll hear an MSP will stand up and just say exactly the same as almost everyone else has already said. I mean, it's really why they think they do it. I don't know. If they want to just register their support, why don't they just stand up and say, yeah, I agree with what everyone else has said. So yeah, count me on that side if they really want to make it clear in the debate. But just to be repeating the same things over and over again. Healthcare, abortion is healthcare. That's one of their favorites, isn't it? But they seem to like to add safe to it. Now, it's abortion. We need safe abortion healthcare. That's the secret. I mean, it reminds me of Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives. He was asked what he thinks about abortion, and he said he's all for it as long as it's safe for everyone involved, which is one of the all-time classic quotes in the history of Scottish politics. I think, how can anyone be so unaware as to say something like that?
Ironically, it's become less safe since the DIY abortions were introduced during COVID.
Yeah, less safe for women. Yep, absolutely. There's talk of private prayer as well. Now, Ross Greer, who's a Christian, he says so. I mean, there's a cross on his X account, so he must be a Christian. He talks about going to church. Is that special sort of Christian that thinks it's okay to kill the unborn and promotes every sort of sexual perversity, and it just comes out with foul-mouthed abuse to people who disagree with him? So is that special type of Christian? But he says is a Christian. So he was saying about the prayer vigils outside abortion clinics. He was saying Jesus says that you should, go and close the door and pray in private. If you pray in public for people to see you, then that's a really bad thing. As though this is like the killer blow. I mean, anyone who thinks people pray outside abortion clinics in order to boost their credentials, in order to impress people, has really not experienced what it's like doing it, because it doesn't boost your social standing. Let's put it that way. And the other thing as well, I mean, they've been told a million times that part of the reason for these visuals is that people can come and talk to them if they'd like some help, if they'd like to discuss things. The people don't approach them, but people can go and talk to them, can and do go and talk to them. But I say, they can hear it a million times. They can forget that. And then you just hear them saying, my friend's a Christian, and he says you can pray anywhere. So why do you need to pray outside an abortion clinic where women who might want to speak to you can come and speak to you? I mean, it's quite bizarre. The other thing they do as well is they commit a logical fallacy about every 5 minutes, and that's sort of lumping together anything that's ever happened anywhere near an abortion clinic and a few things that have never happened as well, and lumping them together and describing that as this is what they do. So they shout at people, they approach people. I mean, some of the stories I think are completely made up, but it all gets lumped together. I mean, if they were talking about driving, it'd be like saying some drivers drive at 90 miles an hour along the high street while they're drunk. That's what drivers do. That's what drivers do. So what do we need to do about them? We need to ban driving. It's the only way. Whereas they know, again, they know full well, they've been told a million times that these vigils are quiet and they don't approach people. And, it's just if people want to go and talk to them that they can do that. In terms of images, they're not like displaying graphic images or sort of harsh messages. In the standard cases, the vast majority of these vigils, but they deliberately lump in what they think is the most controversial aspect, and that becomes what they do. I mean, how could you sit through it this afternoon? I said to Mary, she came out, I'm not sure I could have sat through it. I think there'd have been an interruption if I'd been there. But how did it feel sitting through the whole lot?
Well, I was with some other people and we were kind of mumbling to each other and mumbling and grumbling.
Uh-huh.
That was our outlet.
Yeah. But the family party didn't quite get a mention, but we got a sort of reference because Monica Lennon, Labour MSP, talked about some people tried to block the entrance to the Sandyford clinic, denying people access to it. Well, we did our fake bricking up stunt, publicity stunt, which was mainly aimed at the transgender treatments for kids, by the way, but it is an abortion clinic as well. So we did that on a Saturday morning when it was closed. And that ended up referenced in the Parliament as people attempting to prevent access to the clinic, which is just another illustration of the way they're in fantasy world. Just lies, truth, that doesn't matter. It's just, it's a parallel universe. Total fantasy world. Now, John Mason was the one and only MSP who spoke out against the buffer zones. He spoke very well, I would say. It's very brave of him to do that. I mean, partly I think he's maybe coming up to retirement, so he's not too bothered about the threats from the SNP. He spoke very well, and he did get to the heart of the matter. He said, we're not talking about just women here. We're talking about 2 lives, and lives can be saved by these vigils because women do change their mind as they're going for abortion. So it's quite challenging. I would say the way he said it, I mean, John's a very sort of diplomatic sort of person, I would say. So the other people in the Parliament were saying, isn't it great that even John Mason is allowed to say what he thinks? That just shows what a tolerant and nice bunch we are, that we can even allow John Mason to have a say, which is an interesting line. Now, as a politician, of course, you want to say that. That's like saying, obviously, to all you pro-lifers out there, we're going to ignore you and do completely the opposite of what you want. But I mean, if you could still vote for us, that'd be great. And the bizarre thing is that a lot of people do. So that was John Mason's contribution. One last thing to mention about it was the final score. 123-1 was the vote at the end of it. 3 heroic Conservative MSPs, men of principle and courage, didn't vote. They just stayed away and didn't vote. And John Mason was the one who voted against it. Kate Forbes, she voted for it. So Kate Forbes wants these pro-life activists locking up, like us, for example. So thanks, Kate, for that. To be honest, Kate Forbes doesn't really think that. I don't think. I think she's it's just part of the grand strategy to get the top job. I think she's acting against her conscience and against her real beliefs. But anyway, she did vote for it. It makes you think, if only more people had filled the consultation in, if only more people had written to their MSPs, that could have made all the difference, couldn't it?
I don't think so. I think they're hell-bent on getting this through, and having gone through the inquiry beforehand and knowing that actually that it was just a box ticking exercise. I think it's just clear. It just confirms for me that they've made up their minds already. I think the sad thing is for anybody that did go through the inquiry thinking that they were going to change their minds. I think that could feel like quite a betrayal if they watched the debate, so-called debate today. I think certainly they would have their eyes opened after the debate today and the voting today. Yeah.
I think to me, I mean, hopefully this will make people think. I think anyone who's been saying, fill the consultation in, Write to your MSP. Go and see your MSP. I mean, does this not make it pretty clear that, to be honest, it's a waste of time? It's a waste of time. They've already decided. John Mason wasn't going to change his mind. None of the others were going to change their mind. So all that effort that's gone into that. But then all these people, thousands of people who filled in the consultation, emailed their MSPs. What are they going to do at election time? Probably the last election, most of them voted this lot in. And at the next election, they'll vote them in again. Because we're in a democracy. It's not a letterocracy where they count up how many letters get written and that decides what the government does. It's a democracy. So in 2021, when this batch of MSPs was elected, the die was cast. There was going to be a buffer zone bill coming in. Nothing was going to change that. That was going to happen because that's who was voted in. That's what was in their manifestos. That's the values of the people who are in the Scottish Parliament. And I think a lot of people have the idea, maybe Christians in particular, doesn't matter who you vote for anyone, then once they're in, we can win them over. We can change hearts and minds. We can go and have a cup of coffee with them, and we can invite them to our church, and we'll be so nice to them. We'll get to know them, and we'll win them round to our way, and we'll sort everything out that way. Well, I think the answer is you're not. You're not going to do that. It's not going to work. The way democracy works is when people vote for people to represent their values, and then those people in the parliament speak on their behalf. Now, at the moment, we're only going to be a minority because these are minority viewpoints, but that's the way democracy works. That's the way it works. And I think this saga might help a lot of people to realize that. And then the conversion therapy ban as well, I think, will show that very, very strongly as well. So let's have a look at a few comments before we bring Brian. John Swinney, did I mention the name Person Scheme? Because, of course, he was the architect and a promoter of the name Person Scheme, wasn't he? I always find with John Swinney, whatever he's asked about, he replies in like sort of technical management speak and shows no sort of emotional engagement with it, no recognition of the gravity of the situation. I'm going to try. Some people say I look like John Swinney, which I think is obviously a huge compliment to him. But I was thinking of trying to do some sort of impersonation of him. I can't do accents or anything like that, but I can say the sort of things he would say in answer to certain questions. John Mason was told me that he considers himself to be a rebel. Well, I think he'd be quite right if he considers that. He is a rebel within the SNP. But my big issue is it comes to election time and he knocks on doors and says, vote for this lot. That's what I just think doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Right. So what else have we got? What's this? It's a tangent. What's this all about? There's a late amendment to have airport-style turnstiles. So it's half a kilometre walk back and forth. Get them to change their minds with the outside abortion clinics. Well, let's have a look. Yeah, I don't know how Kate sleeps at night, and I could easily imagine that she would get to the stage where she'd say, I can't do this anymore. The tension is too great. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? It's a very different path, compromising on your values and going up the greasy pole. You don't even need to go up the greasy pole. And if you're doing the SNP and you're sort of half articulate and you put effort into it, or whatever, you can soon find yourself as a councillor or an elected, an MSP or an MP, especially if you've got some sort of disability, because that gets you to the top of the list. So I think Emma Roddick, I think Emma Harper as well, who I was talking about in my Incompetent MSPs video recently. I think she got to the top of this. She became an MSP because she's got an illness. And she hasn't got a clue what's going on in the debate. That might sound really cruel, but that's what the SNP is doing. It's putting people in the Scottish Parliament who are not capable of doing the job. You sort of feel sorry for them because you can see they're just floundering. They don't know what's going on. But what are you supposed to do as an opposition party? Are you not supposed to point it out? We've got to point it out. I mean, again, the lady's been paid £70,000 as well to not be able to do the job. Right. With John Swinney coming back onto the agenda, we've republished a few of our golden oldies about John Swinney. Obviously, my challenge to him in the meeting there years ago, and also when we decorated his constituency office with some unofficial signage on his window. So you can see that on our social media feeds. What's this? What's this? John Swinney, tell you where to find the end of a circle. Haven't heard that one before. Yeah. Did I say this? I always imagine with John Swinney. I mean, if, say, they dug up 3 bodies in Nicola Sturgeon's garden, 3 decapitated bodies, and they said to John Swinney, right, what have you got to say about this? He'd say, well, we got the excavator. The police have dug the ground down to 2 meters. And after they've been taken away, the lawn will be restored and will follow all the correct guidance and apply the correct fertilizers. And by the end of the week, there'll be no sign of any disturbance to the lawn. That's the sort of way he replied. It just like talks about the technicalities and the process, whatever, without actually recognizing any of the issues involved. At the time I challenged him about the sex education was the classic example. I present him with a litany of basically filth from the education resources. And it just says it's age appropriate and we need to prepare children to make good decisions in their life, completely ignoring the points I've made. Anyway, have we got any other comments to go?
No.
Right, so Bruce, right. If Forbes took your advice and moved to ban abortion as First Minister, what do you think would happen? Well, she wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't work because there'd be an overwhelming majority against it in the Parliament. To which people might say, you see, you can't do the impossible. So, okay, but I think there's a line to draw. No matter what your tactics are, there's a red line, and the red line is you can't lie about what you believe. I think that's the red line. So if someone thinks, I want to be First Minister, so I'm going to keep my views about abortion secret, I'm going to do my very best to not talk about them, then if you're put on the spot and someone really presses you, then you can say, I'd rather not say, thank you. But if you actually say the opposite of what you really believe, then you cross the line, and I don't care what your tactics are, I don't care what your grand strategy is, that you can't do that. You can't do that. And I don't think Kate Forbes would disagree with that. I say I'm sure she must be in turmoil at the moment. And if she goes into another leadership contest, well, she knows it didn't quite work the next time. So this time she'd maybe think, I need to try even harder to obscure or deny what I really believe this time. So that's quite concerning that might happen. You do have to lie in politics. If you name a successful politician who didn't lie in the public eye, I'll be very surprised. Right, disagree completely. Lying is never justified, so it's just wrong. So
no. Abraham Lincoln that was famous for never lying.
Was he?
Honest Abe. He was known as.
Yeah. But that's a very interesting point, because I would say, I probably didn't say this before, in schools in Scotland, you tell me about an assembly about telling lies. You know, you don't tell lies. I bet you find it hard to come up with any account of an assembly. How many assemblies for like Black History Month, LGBT issues, equality and diversity? That's the new morality. The old-fashioned stuff like you don't tell lies, they're not really interested in that anymore. And it's not just fashion. It's often that people actually don't believe these values anymore. I mean, if you ask the people in Scotland, is it wrong to tell lies? What proportion would say, yes, it's wrong to tell lies? I think it would be a depressingly low percentage. Abraham Lincoln didn't face 300 journalists every day, scores of cameras, nor the internet, apples and oranges. Not at all. Not at all. Everyone faces the same temptations to lie in different situations. So I've got no sympathy with that view at all. Right, John, interesting. Are we going to have a Scottish election? I think not. Ash Reagan's not going to bring down a nationalist government. That would be a suicidal move for Alba. So I can't say that would happen. She'd be out of a job, of course, as well, if an election actually happened, because she would lose her seat. So I'm not anticipating it. If we do have one, that suits us really well, because in Scotland, if you have a Scottish election, say this year, the next one still happens in 2026. So you can have as many as you like, but the ones that's scheduled every 5 years, they still happen, unless the other one was within 6 months of it. So you know, with Westminster elections, you have an election, then the clock starts ticking for 5 years until the next one. In Scotland, it doesn't work like that. If you have an extraordinary election, the next one still happens bang on schedule. So if they do want to bring down the government and have a Scottish election, then we're raring to go. Just before we bring Brian, a word on, apparently his camp farm is only 100,000. I'm shopping. Just to say, the chairman of the Scottish Family Party has bought a camper van recently, and the treasurer as well had a large, brand new camper van on his drive recently. I'm not one to start rumours around the internet, but they are facts. They are facts. So make of that what you will. Keep your eye on the newspaper. If you see a police tent in either of their gardens soon, then you'll know something's been going on. Right, Brian, I'll give you a couple of seconds warning. Right, I will bring you on and let's get talking. Right, welcome back.
Hello.
Right, it's good to see you. I'll just turn my sound up a little bit. Now, as I always say when I introduce Brian, I sometimes say Scotland's a debate desert. It's really difficult to get people to debate. But Brian is great because he'll come on and we can have a good discussion. Now, Brian said if we were going to talk about abortion, he would there should be a woman present. So I actually replied to him and said, I'm sure I can find a random token woman somewhere. So I found one for us. So thanks, Mary, for coming on. So why don't we start with what you've heard so far? Any comments about the buffer zone debate?
Yeah, I mean, plenty to say about buffer zones, as you can imagine. And I think that, you know, the big key thing is that a lot of these women that are going in to have a procedure that they won't have just thought about willy-nilly, to have what they might perceive as people judging them for going in and coming out. I think that would be a pretty horrible thing to feel. But again, you know, it's a debate now about distance, 150 meters to 100 meters, and it did pass, as you said, 123 to 1. So that kind of speaks volumes within itself. And I really don't know how much of that is bandwagon jumping and how many people actually gave it a good deal of thought. I don't know how politicians go through these things, but yeah, that speaks for itself. 123 to 1. That's quite a margin.
What would you say about people feeling judged? What would you say to that?
I think it's putting people's feelings above. It's almost like on a scale, you know, people feeling slightly uncomfortable for a few seconds in a baby's life and saying that somebody's feelings for a few seconds carry more weight than the life of a child in the womb.
I completely get where you're coming from there, Marion, and thanks for saying that, because when we are looking at it on balance, you're right, it is the difference between a human life and like existing and not existing. So if that's the heart of the crux of the matter, then as I said, the women that are going in for these procedures, this will be a last resort for them. And it's either that or having a child that they don't want. What happens if that child's born? That child has to be adopted or go into care, and we all know that can have a lot of negative ramifications for the child. So, you know, if we do have to find a balance, then where does that balance lie? And well, you know, we do have to have checks and balances in place to stop these things happening, to stop unwanted pregnancies and, you know, women going in and having, I don't know how many abortions in a lifetime, but, you know, so what would you say to that? I mean, obviously it's an emotional issue for yourself, and you have given it a lot of thought and a lot of time. So, with
So
regards
just like you both talked about balance there, the scales. So you both talked about yeah.
So, if you were talking about a sliding scale on like you're using the example of women that have given it a lot of thought, there will be women that have given it some thought. There'll be women that have given it very little thought. There'll be women that haven't spoken to anyone about it. There'll be women that feel completely alone and feeling compelled to do it. There will be women that are being coerced into abortion. There'll be women who are choosing abortion because they don't have financial help. It's to take one end of that sliding scale and make a decision on buffer zones based on them is ignoring all the other possibilities, and people do change their minds, and they're glad they did. You know, many women go ahead with an abortion and regret it, and they live with the death of their child for the rest of their life. Many women are traumatized by abortion. They live with trauma for the rest of their lives. And a lot of women, when they go through post-abortion recovery, they begin to unpack the whole experience. And then they say, well, that's when my alcohol issue started. That's when the depression started. That's when the panic attack started. So to take away that little chink, that little bit of light, or that little pause before they go for an abortion, to take away that opportunity for somebody just to say, I can point you to some help. I can point you to some advice. Why would people want to take away that for those ones who they're making the choice to have an abortion when it might not be a good idea for them, you know, that they're going to live with really awful consequences for the rest of their life. At the age of 20, you know, if a woman lives for 60 years with regret, how is that kind? How is that protecting women?
Okay, I'm really glad that you said that. So when it comes to the after effects of abortion, yeah, you're right, the mental health, and I think these things, you know, while they can be managed, it's unfortunate that they do happen at all. And I'll get on to the offerings of help in just a moment, but wouldn't it be as or even more traumatic to have had to have carried a child to term, knowing fine well that you were going to be giving up that child, and wondering for the rest of your life, for the other 60 odd years that are left of your life, where that child is? Does that child even know who I am? Do they want to know who I am? You know, that's a trauma in and of itself as well. And we'll come on just briefly to touch on the subject of offering help. While it is useful, then would it not be more appropriate for that to be offered at a medical level? So on the initial GP appointment, or maybe in the hospital visit, would it not be something that they should be spoken to by professionals there, rather than being pointed to another group of people that will do whatever they can to make sure that woman gives birth to that child, whether they're ready for it or not?
I think that's a great idea, Bri. It's certainly Scottish family policy to have independent advice in the hospital or clinic. That is SFP policy, but it doesn't actually happen. As things stand, it doesn't happen. It's like a conveyor belt for a woman when she goes to the doctor or to a clinic. It's as soon as she said that she wants an abortion, it's pretty much a conveyor belt to the abortion. There aren't checks, there aren't question. Adoption is never, ever raised as an option. And other avenues of help aren't offered. Like crisis pregnancy support isn't offered.
Okay. I will have to disagree with you on the one point, because that help is offered. I am aware of a couple of people that have in the past few years had terminations, and although one of them was for a legitimate medical reason that would not have been a viable pregnancy, so it had to have happened, which is unfortunate. But the other one, the GP, they did speak to them beforehand and said, is this something that you thought about? Would you like any help? Would you like any advice? And when they got to the hospital themselves, they were spoken to by the nurses, and they were, is this something that you've given this thought? You're here of your own free will. And, you did mention about coercion into abortion. Then you will also have to agree that there are women that are being coerced into giving birth.
By who?
By their families, by their husbands, by their partners. They would be, if they were in a position where they could say, I don't want to have this child. And then there are women in situations, and it does happen. It happens all over the world, where women are kept pregnant by their partners through abusive means. And it genuinely does happen, sorry to say. Yeah, and there are certain countries where it happens more because of religious backgrounds. And I'm not going to say what they are, but I'm sure you could fill in the blanks there, that abortions are illegal, completely illegal. So it's not an option. And, women are, by and large, having very, very large families. And you will know that giving birth and remaining full-term pregnant can take a toll on a woman's body. So multiple births in a lifetime are going to cause multiple issues.
Can I come back on the coercion point? I never thought about that one before. That's a new argument I've heard. So my first response to that would be coercion's a bad thing, and it can happen with regard to anything. Mm-hmm. It can happen with regard to what a person wears, where they go, what they watch on television, what they eat, whether they have an abortion, don't have abortion, etc. So coercion can be a bad thing, and it can happen in any regard. But I think what we're talking about here, though, is that coercion might be coercion to do something bad, which is just like doubly bad, because it's coercion and it's to do something wrong. But there might be coercion to make a decision that actually is the best decision. The coercion is still wrong, even if the outcome might be right, might be the best. The coercion would still be wrong. Does that clarify that the difference?
Yeah, I'd absolutely clarify that. So you're maintaining the position that all abortion is wrong. So by coercing somebody into not having an abortion, that's good. I just want to make that clear.
It's a good outcome. It's not the right thing to do, but it would have a positive outcome. It's like someone could be coerced to prevent them from committing a crime that they might otherwise have committed, for example.
So by equating abortion to a crime, by insisting that abortion is always a negative thing, then by coercing somebody into not going through with an abortion, if you want to say that all abortions are a bad thing, then by that logic, two wrongs kind of make a right in some weird sense. But no, that would be, dismissing the lives of the women that are carrying these children that don't have the means or don't see themselves as being able to be a parent for whatever reason that might be. So where is the line in terms of abortion? Are we allowing it for cases of rape and incest? Obviously, we'll allow it for medical grounds. That's a bit of a write-off there. But for genuine medical grounds, okay, we could keep that to the side. Are we okay with that?
The danger to the mother's life, yes.
Yeah, danger to the mother's life or an unviable pregnancy, okay. Rape and incest, what about that?
Yeah, I think, as you say, two wrongs don't make a right. It's like that. If a woman has been raped, that is extremely traumatic. It's probably one of the most traumatic things that could happen to a woman. But to add another trauma to that in abortion, having an abortion, I don't think that negates, I don't think that helps her. I think it probably adds to her trauma. And also,
what about giving birth to the child of the rapist and keeping that adoption? That's got to be a whole other level of trauma, Mary. I mean, when we're looking at that.
I don't think so. I think there is some evidence to suggest that women recover better from rape when they have the baby, when they go ahead. It's actually becomes redemptive.
No, I would really legitimately need to see evidence of that. If that is a heck of a claim. I've never ever heard that before.
I've read one book called, I've got it upstairs. I can't remember what it's called now. And it's the story. It was a woman who a man broke into her house and raped her, a Christian woman, and she decided to keep the baby. Her and her husband decided to keep the baby. And that's what the book is about, just how redemptive that was for her to actually have that baby and to love that baby and see something good coming out of something which was absolutely horrific for her.
Yeah, I say there is significant research. Now, this sort of research is never conclusive, but there is a body of research indicating that that women who have been raped and have the child as opposed to having an abortion tend to have better outcomes in the longer term. So the idea that like abortion is some sort of treatment for the trauma of rape, I think
Josh, can you look into that and send me a message, please, before the debate ends? Because I would really like to pick up on that point if that's legitimate.
All right, so
I would be really surprised if that was the case. And if this research exists, and then in all of the research I've done on the topic, I would have seen that by now. And to base this on a book written by a Christian woman who clearly has an anti-abortion agenda.
I wasn't basing it on that. I'm just giving you something tangible, which I can send you the name of it when I remember it. But something tangible that you could actually, if you want to, read her story, because it's an absolutely beautiful story.
Well, it may be a beautiful story. Okay, well, we could say that is one of those cases where it happened. But when you eventually get to outlaw abortion, does that include cases of rape and incest?
The law.
When it comes to the law and abortion, would you want it to be for cases? Would you want abortion to be outlawed for cases of rape and incest?
Yeah, because I don't think the child should be punished.
Yeah. And in the cases of incest, when we know that these genetic issues can happen and illnesses and things down the line, and the child having a family tree that's a straight line, their uncle being their father, and all this kind of stuff, is that okay? Those kids should be okay. They'll be fine.
Are you for eugenics then? Is that what you're saying, that it's better to abort people who have disabilities?
Not one bit at all.
Because that's what it sounds like. You're in favour of eugenics.
No. I'm on about cases of incest. That is completely different from genetic abnormalities that might happen. I'm on about cases of incest, where a family member has had sex with another family member, that female family member gets pregnant with that child. Is that something that you would say?
Can you explain what is your concern about incest? Is it a moral concern or is it a genetic concern you've got?
It's a moral concern. I don't really. It's the genetic part of it. I don't really care about. It's a moral concern. Okay, right, yeah. Okay. Genetic abnormalities are one thing, but that's that's blurring the medical grounds lines. I'm on about the child whose father is also their grandfather.
Okay, let's
whose mother is also their auntie.
Yeah, I think a helpful way to think about this is to think about how we would treat a baby that had been born. So a baby that had been born as a result of rape or incest, would it be okay to kill that baby because they were the product of rape or incest?
I'm not on about the destruction of a life post utero or the destruction of a viable pregnancy. Yeah. I'm on about the ending of a non-viable pregnancy, which means that the child cannot survive outside the womb. If it's beyond, if it's below that age, that's what a termination of a pregnancy is. Okay, so that's what it is. Anything after that is a cesarean section or an induced pregnancy, because that child will be alive when it's born. Nobody's going to kill the kid when it comes out of the womb because the mother doesn't want it. That's murder. Okay, so that's clarified there. Where do we go in cases of incest?
Okay, the thing sometimes it's a helpful way to argue or to think something through by starting with a case where we can agree, and then just going a bit further to see where the differences emerge. So we're agreed that a baby, once it's been born, whether it's the product of rape, incest, or anything else, doesn't matter. Huge value, terrible crime, terrible evil to kill the baby. So how about just before the baby's born? What's the situation then, Jim?
So assuming full term, could we go assuming it's in 9 months? Yeah. So just before it's born, are we looking at 8.5 months?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to end that pregnancy at 8.5 months, section or an induced pregnancy.
Oh no, it could be it's abortion.
So killing the child in utero at 8.5 months.
Yeah, that's legal in Scotland.
Okay. I'll agree that should be illegal. Okay.
Great. I mean, you're on our side. I mean, we agree it should be legal. In Scotland, it is legal in cases of disability.
The ending of a non-viable pregnancy. The ending of a pregnancy when it's past the viable point. So we'll say, I don't know the exact times, but we'll say 26 weeks. Okay, that's when the child can survive outside the womb. Yeah.
The youngest have been 22 weeks.
22 weeks. Okay, so let's say
some surviving at 22 weeks.
I mean, if we just chalk up an agreement, I'm not saying we've convinced you. I don't think you've changed your mind. You already thought this.
No.
I'm delighted that we both agree that abortions after 22 weeks.
I'll just quickly finish that point if that's all right. So we'll say the 22-week mark, right? That's when the child can survive outside the womb. All right. If the mother chooses to end the pregnancy for whatever reason, and that child is viable, and that child can survive outside the womb, that child has every right to all the medical care that it needs to survive. Whatever the mother's decision, if she wants to keep that baby or whatever, then to end the pregnancy after the point at which it's viable, then I personally think that should be illegal. So for the purposes of this debate, the abortion would be the ending of a non-viable pregnancy for non-medical reasons. Is that okay?
Yeah, I understand your position. Just that's an interesting comment, Mr. Goff. If you could explain a bit more what you mean. I think maybe you're quoting me. I was asking whether or not a child that's the product of rape or incest is less valuable or doesn't matter. So maybe that make that clearer. I could try to answer that. Yes. So viability is the key criterion for you.
I think so.
Why is viability the key criterion?
So it's that's just a simple definition of terms. I think is what we're needing there, because to end the pregnancy, if the child can't survive outside the womb, then that child, deserves, like I said, every care. But to end a pregnancy at 8.5 months by the destruction of the fetus, then that's not something I agree with at all. That's extremely dangerous, and it's disgusting, because who would want to do that? Like carry a child that far just to say, done, away you go.
Well, that's horrible. The Greens, the Lib Dems, a lot of MSPs, a lot of MPs, Britain, in the case of disability. So an awful lot of people want to do that. Could you explain a bit more to me, though, about why viability is such a crucial factor? So it changes from sort of having no moral worth. It's okay to end the life, or whatever you want to call it, but then at viability, suddenly it takes on the value of a human being. That's obviously a massive change. Could you explain a bit more about why you think viability?
I think for me, viability means the difference between the ending of the pregnancy. That's the abortion is the idea, or the termination of the pregnancy is ending the pregnancy. Okay.
Mhm.
So, in my opinion, for what it's worth, if the child is viable, the mother decides to end the pregnancy, then the pregnancy should be ended and that child be given every chance at life. That's just what I think. I'm probably, I don't know. I haven't given that part of it much thought myself, if I'm being honest.
Right.
But I think that when it comes to, ending a pregnancy and the child's not viable, then sadly, that is going to be the case. And I just want to know, from your standpoint, what should, in terms of abortion and the definition of abortion and what that means, what should be illegal? And that's why I'm going for the cases of rape and incest. Sorry.
Going back to that idea of, when a baby's viable, it's suddenly on the scale, it just suddenly carries more weight. But one day beforehand, assuming there was a law saying 22 weeks was the point at which a child was viable, so abortion would be illegal after that point. So you're kind of saying one day before, that baby has absolutely no value. The only way to measure that baby's value is whether the mother wants it or not.
Yeah, and again, that's the sticky point, and I think that we do have limits in place at the moment of when terminations can be allowed, and I hear a lot of people saying about the late stage terminations that babies are ripped from the mother's womb when they're almost fully formed, and the child's given no chance of life. And yeah, I don't think that that's right. I think that if the mother chooses to end the pregnancy, she no longer wants to be pregnant, then if that child's viable, then okay, give that child the chance of life. That's just where I stand on it. But
it's interesting. You got me thinking here. So I've thought a new thought. Whenever I think I've thought a new thought, I find out someone else has written 2 books about it somewhere. But my new thought is, if you imagine a baby in the womb at, let's say, 21 weeks gestation, down the road in the hospital in Scotland. So according to your thinking, not viable, therefore not valuable. But then in Japan, a baby's born at 21 weeks and it survives. So because a baby's been born at 21 weeks and survived in Japan, suddenly this baby down the road in Scotland suddenly gets full human rights and becomes morally valuable because of what happens in Japan. Is that credible?
So I'm not saying that the child has no worth. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that it has no attachments, no moral rights or anything like that. But at the end of the day, it does. We're focusing on the rights of the child and completely ignoring the rights of the women. And you spoke about that in your introduction, and you're on about women's rights. But yeah, it is a really important issue. And I don't think that we should be legislating against any medical procedure. And while it is an emotional issue, and while there is a real depth of emotional attachment to it, because you're dealing with very, very young human lives in utero, then yeah, there is going to be that emotional component to it. But don't think for a second that the vast majority of women out there haven't given it a lot of thought and don't live with what could have happened. But in a lot of circumstances, that procedure is a genuine lifesaver. And I'm not on about in a medical sense, I'm on about in a social sense. It's going to be completely impossible. There's young women tearing their hair out, not even necessarily a young woman, could be an older woman. I can't do this, I can't have this child, this is going to completely destroy everything about my life. Should she be forced into having that child, is what I'm saying.
Just panic though. That's what happens in a crisis pregnancy. A woman just panics. And it's all the fear is, the panic of, oh, how am I going to manage this? In the same way, lots of life-changing events cause people to go into a panic. Somebody suddenly dies, people panic. I'm never going to cope. But they adapt. They learn to cope without a spouse, or that's what traumatic events do to people. They cause them to panic and to think about the worst case scenario. You know, they look at it through the lens of trauma and shock, but actually the reality is that people are extremely resilient. They adapt.
So they can be extremely resilient and adapt post-abortion as well then?
I think that's quite a different thing, because it's actually a conscience issue. I think if somebody violates their own conscience and takes the life of another person, that does something really harmful to their conscience. I would say it's a spiritual issue.
Well, what about those that aren't?
Sorry?
What about for those that aren't spiritual? It's not a spiritual issue. It's a real world issue. And let's not forget, it is a real world issue for everybody, spiritual or not. Because
I think we're all spiritual. That I would say we're all spiritual, whether we realise it or not. We all have a conscience. Every single person has a conscience.
That's that's your morality kicking in. That's what conscience is. It's
where does that come from? Where does your morality? Where does morality come from?
Morality comes from society. Morality comes from the way we've been brought up. In some countries, it's completely moral to cut somebody's hand off for stealing from you. You know, morality is something that is subjective, and when it boils down,
that would be a great. This would be a great debate for another week. Would you do that? Would you come and? It's one of my favorite topics.
Any day of the week, I will do that until the cows come home.
We'll book you in. Can I ask you? Sorry, can I just ask you a question? This is not something I think you think. I'm just interested to know what you think about the people who do think it. But there are such things as crisis pregnancy centres, or just organisations, charities that exist with a particular purpose of women who find themselves pregnant. They're panicking, they don't know what to do. They're worried about how they'll cope. And there's organizations that basically set up to say, right, we're here to help you. What you need, we'll try and support you. And they're objective. They do want to help people who might otherwise have an abortion to make the decision to keep their child. They're not merely by offering help. That's what they're trying to do. Now, there's some, for example, MSPs in the Scottish Parliament who are dead set against these sort of organizations. They think there's something sinister about them. Now, from what you're saying, I'm imagining that you will say, no, that sounds fine by me. But, well, let's ask that question first. Those sort of organizations, are you happy with their operation?
So, yeah, I will say, by and large, those organizations, fine. No problem with that at all.
So my question is, can you understand why, for example, some MSPs are so hostile to them?
I could probably think of why they would argue that point, and I can see where they're coming from. But again, if it's a purely practical thing, if a woman finds herself, completely without barely £2 in her bank account, she's in a ton of debt, but she finds herself pregnant, she wants to have this baby, but she sees no other option, and it's either, what do I do, or termination. So if she wants to have that pregnancy, goes to one of these places that can help her out so that she feels more comfortable, gets sorted out, gets settled, ready for the baby coming, you're all good. Here's your benefits. They're sorted for when the baby comes. You'll be fine. Why not have those places? That's just wonderful. What I think that some MSPs might be thinking, and again, I don't speak for the MSPs, is that some of these places might be pressuring women to keep the pregnancy. If they go in, as soon as they go in the door, and I have heard this argument, so I know that's pretty much what they're thinking, but some of the places, as soon as a woman walks in the door, then they'll be spoken to until they're blue in the face about, you are keeping this baby, you're keeping this baby, and having it drilled into her. If that's what they're thinking, then okay. I think that if places can exist that help people out, that have and well, it's not just the women, but the men involved as well. If they're not in a position where they can provide for whatever reason, then help should be available, and they should be there to help and support families by all means. Yeah.
Well, it's 10 o'clock.
It's flown in.
And last thing you want to say? You got anything that you'd like to pitch in just to conclude, Bri or Mary?
I think this has been an extremely illuminating, well-mannered debate, discussion. Murray, absolute pleasure speaking to you. Richard, whenever you're in Dundee, message me, we'll go for a pint. It still stands.
Absolutely. So, Bri, yeah, excellent. I say, Bri is the oasis in the debate desert. So we appreciate you coming in. Let's just give an invitation to Mr. or Mrs. Goff. If you'd like to come and do a Bri, if you'd like to come on the live stream and have a chat sometime, we would be delighted to do that. And
just, if you ever wanted to speak about morality and religion, that's my happy place.
Oh, mine too. Mine too. I've debated that a couple of times already. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your comments. Right. Thank you. Yeah, that was very interesting. What I liked about tonight is it's made me think 2 new thoughts. As I say, they're probably not new. There's probably lots of other people who've thought them already. But that makes me happy when I've added something, I think, to my thinking. So thanks very much, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for watching live and later on.
There we go.
Very good.
I have to do that.
Right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week. Good night.